Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Andrew. Hey Bryan, I'd like to request the song Adulruna Rediviva. Adulruna Rediviva by symphonic metal band Therion for a special selection. The song is the epic closer off of their '07 album Gothic Kabbalah. That album features my favorite Therion lineup of all time, with Christopher Johnson at the helm as usual, a great cast of singers, the Neiman brothers on guitars and bass, and finally the secret sauce of Peter Carlson's drumming, which I find really elevates the usual Therion sound. I've heard him before when I reacted to Gorilla Laments by Diablo Swing Orchestra. Okay. One tip for Therion reactions in general: don't expect to fully understand the lyrics unless you have some specialist knowledge of the occult. For example, this song is based off of a 17th century Swedish manuscript, so you're unlikely to know the context. The lyrics are in English though, so if you still want to give it a go. I will. I will feel a little better when I don't get it. So I was looking here because we did do Therion. I pointed this way, but I meant to point that way. We did do Therion a couple weeks ago with First and Last, but we checked out something off of their 1991 album Of Darkness and one off of their 2022 album Leviathan 2. Leviathan 2 is their 18th album, and Leviathan 3, which comes out this year, will be their 19th. We are going to be looking at their 13th album, Gothic Kabbalah. This still puts us closer to their symphonic metal side, but it'll be interesting to see a little earlier of that. I had nothing but praise pretty much for Leviathan 2. Min Marar, I can't remember what the title was called of the song, but that track we listened to from Leviathan 2, I had pretty much nothing but praise on. But this will be neat because it'll be, again, a little closer to their modern style, but somewhere between the first and the last that we checked out a couple weeks ago. So, let's dig into this Adulruna Rediviva. I don't know why that's so hard for me to pronounce. Let's dig into this and see what Therion is bringing to the table today. Very mysterious. A little bit of darkness in that cello. This is just reverence. This is very much like a hymn. So we started with the instruments on the, and then the next note held out was the choir, and then we reversed it where the choir is on the quick notes and then the guitars are holding it out. Really neat idea.
In ancient days, in an ancient world, the sibyls sung their melodies, but the song is lost, and no one here when sibyls speak the words of gods. The world is ancient sibyl,
real fun idea. Yeah. I love that cymbal idea. Ooh, kind of an industrial vibe with that bass. Once again, kind of leaning into the mystery sounds. A little bit of exoticism in there as we slightly move into a very interesting mode. Because of that crossfade that was more like a fade out and then a fade in, with this guitar coming in from nothing. Ooh, I pictured a screen wipe. Just some straight metal right here. Really interesting to place those ride cymbal hits around the snare. Very adventurous. We've gone through so many emotions in this track. Beautiful little flute idea there. Kind of like a folky idea right here. really painting a vivid picture with the instruments, lines. Oh yeah, real nice rhythm there in the drums. That pattern is nice. Okay. This is so out of place. Which I think might be the purpose of it. Heavy use of that China cymbal. I don't think we've heard it all song. Dude's just smashing it here during the guitar solo. Smooth transition into this new key? Mood, if nothing else. We've lightened up quite a bit. Once again, I want to point out, I really love that vocal technique. The operatic with the belts and the layering of the two. Really weird. Yeah, that's bonkers. The drummer's accent, well, it's not even just the drummer, it's everyone. The accent pattern is so strange. It's in 4/4, but it feels constantly in flux. Okay. Yeah, this one's gonna be difficult to pick apart. Um, oh, it's 1337 long. Okay. Us 90, us 90 kids. That number will never not mean something. Um, so many little moments in here that I think worked really well. The overall flow of it was, I mean, it worked there as well. There were a couple of really harsh transitions, but I kind of picture them as purposeful. Like when a director will choose to use a smash cut um, instead of a long sequence for a desired effect. I know in the past I've been pretty harsh about harsh transitions. I'm trying to come around to them from at least an artistic perspective. I do think they can be overused, but in a piece like this where I'd say it's about 50-50, I think it's more of an intentional choice because it's not that the composer can't fluidly shift between their ideas. They're specifically choosing not to in those moments. Um, so the song has really nice flow to it. There's beautiful ideas on the micro concepts, each individual section, and even just some of the ideas themselves in isolation of what goes on around them are gorgeous. But the song works on a whole as well. It took me on a journey from start to finish. We heard a lot of really interesting combinations of ideas. We explored quite a few different atmospheres and emotions, and even just basic compositional themes. This is a song that, while it is a few albums prior to the latest track that we checked out from them not too long ago, it is. I was. Oh. Uh. Okay, that seems delayed. Um. While it while it is a bit older than the latest track that we checked out from them not too long ago, it's it is very close to their modern sound. I hear very little difference between this and that track we checked out a couple weeks ago. The only difference is I really hear is a maturation of sound. A lot of the concepts, a lot of the compositional identity of whoever puts all this together is very similar, despite the personnel changes, despite the years between this. Yeah, this was '07. So we're looking at a good 15 years between that and Leviathan 2. And, at least three albums if you don't want to count Leviathan 1. Lots of time for the composer to grow, and what I hear is a maturation of sound, of production, rather than an evolution of technique. There's just a lot of similarities between these two. So, let's uh, hmm, let's dive into this. First thing I want to talk about, what I think is probably the most important, is atmosphere, uh, emotion, and the evolution of these. I pointed out as many sections as I thought was relevant and that I picked up on. And the song starts out with a very mysterious vibe. We have a cello on the low end. Sorry, we have a cello on the low end creating a bit of darkness within the mystery, and I believe it was a piano dancing above it, creating the allure. So it's this idea of not knowing what something is, probably should having a little bit of fear about it, but also being, enthused, intrigued by it. There's this mystical darkness to it. What is that? I need to know. So we have that allure, that uh, what's the word? I guess just allure. about whatever this is. And Andrew had mentioned, I think Andrew had mentioned that this was based off of some. Let me just pull this back up. I don't want to butcher any of this. A 17th century Swedish manuscript. So there's that. This manuscript could have uh, a type of hidden element to it. It could have something of a mystical component where people need to decipher it and figure out what it's talking about, and maybe there is some darkness revolving around it. I don't know. That's how the track introduces itself, though. There's mystery, there is darkness, and there is temptation. There's allure. There's uh, the draw to pull us in. I think it's really interesting from this. It takes us into, if I remember correctly, reverence. I think the next section is what I said was feeling like a hymn. Not only did we have the choir, but we had the strings presenting us with chords and melodies of strength and fear. And I always correlate that to reverence, much like, especially in the Christian music, Judeo Christian music, having that powerful sound of the organ mixed with some of the haunting tones that we tend to associate with Baroque. A lot of hymns are based on, well, I don't know if hymns are based on Baroque music. It's been a long time since I've actually listened to a hymn. Um, but I do know a lot of churches had Baroque music written for them. It was the music of the time. The fact that we associate it with darkness and Halloween now is shifting of culture and time. But Baroque was the sound of church at the time. So that power and fear kind of bring together that element of reverence. For me, we hear that here at the beginning. Of course, we also have the choir with it. And then the story of the song is whiplash. It goes in so many different directions at so many different times. I don't remember the exact order after this. This was certainly where the impression was made as far as atmosphere goes, and then I began to deviate and look at more specific elements after this. But I always did check in with the atmosphere, and we went through quite a few ideas. We continued to look at some of the darkness that the cello brought us in the beginning. We had one more element of that unknowing, that mystical component um, of hidden knowledge kind of idea. And I pointed that out. I think it was in the 60-70% into the track, closer to the end. There's also a couple of folk elements that I pointed out. The guitars were playing. I think if we slowed them down by about half speed, they would be a pretty traditional folk idea, but they were instead shredding them on metal electric guitars. So, but we had a flute overhead, and the combination of these two sounds, not necessarily the speed in the guitar, but the notes being played and what the flute was doing, and whatever we had some chords. I don't know what instrument was giving it to us. Reminded me of power metal. Reminded me of folk music driven through electric instruments. And that was paired with this adventurous, bright sound. I think the first time we had this folk element, directly after it, we had this bright, adventurous sound, like going off on a journey. My mind immediately went to Leaving the Shire, Lord of the Rings. It's the brightness of the journey, the beginning of it, before you've met any hardships. Um, and so this song, I mean, we also had some darker sections. We had some pure metal sections that just kind of really gave us that driving rule of cool sound. We did have some theatric elements that sounded pretty much like a choir telling the audience of impending danger. You know, you know the situational irony of the audience having information about upcoming perils that our protagonist does not know about, right? That kind of narrative singing style. I don't know if the lyrics were actually saying that, but the music and the choir together is what gave me that idea. Um, and we also had a couple of film score areas which were really based around this bombastic feeling with these huge string and maybe just string stingers. These really quick bop, 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 ba bop, bop. These really energetic, powerful moments where the whole string section comes together, usually on octaves, to really drive home the width and power of this. Since they'll be the same notes, they have similar wavelengths, and they amplify each other very easily. Um, and so we just have this flurry of emotional atmospheres that the song interweaves between. We have some calmer moments as well. I'm not too sure what to read into them. They sort of were more about the atmosphere than the chordal emotional resonance, or at least that's what I pulled out of it. It's very possible you listen to those moments, you're like, yeah, those chords very clearly indicated this emotion to me, and like, yeah, beautiful. Um, I didn't have that read, but that doesn't mean that those emotions aren't there. That's usually why I get this communal thing going. At the end of the video, comment, let me know your perspective, how you interpreted it. I'm just somebody on the internet, one dude, one set of ears. I'm not hearing everything. So, yeah, like I said, I think that's the most important part is the journey of the song, and it's told primarily through uh, the musical ideas creating the atmospheres and the emotional concepts. A lot of it is chord based, but like I had mentioned with the big film score section, that was primarily based around how the instruments were playing the notes, more so than the notes themselves. Um, so yeah, I mean that right there. Honestly, I could stop right there and say that that's why this track is interesting. That's why I enjoyed it. That's the same thing that I enjoyed about Therion's other track. They have a way of telling a story with their music, with their emotion. I don't know what the lyrics are to this. Even if I hadn't been told it was about some 17th century manuscript, I think I still would have had a really interesting journey. The images that flashed in my mind based on the music would still have been a fantastic journey to be on. They just have a phenomenal ability to craft story out of music, or vice versa, to make music out of a story. I don't know how their composer works. Some people have images in their head, they make music to match it. Some people have music in their head, and people end up hearing it and making video in their mind about it. Um, for those curious, I do it both ways. Sometimes I start with a concept and I try to make music to fit images, and sometimes I start with riffs and I just build off of them and see where the music takes me. No visual component to build off of. Um, so I think right here I want to talk about just some smaller ideas. We'll see where my brain takes me on that, and then we'll hit the lyrics. So first of all, the drummer was specifically pointed out by our requester, and yes, I don't remember pointing out the drummer the last time we checked out Therion. And I don't necessarily know that I would have pointed this drummer out, but there were some really neat ideas here that I enjoyed rhythmically. I don't think the drummer popped off until the latter half. We heard some really cool things all over the place there, which reminds me we need to talk about that final rhythmic idea. Um, we had that really interesting ride cymbal concept. We had a backbeat snare hitting on 2 and 4, and the ride cymbal was dancing around that, never hitting on the beat with the snare, but sort of on the, I think it was the off beats around the snare hits. If it was a hi-hat, especially if the hi-hat was shifting from open to close, um, probably would have had a dancey feel to it. It was an interesting decision. I pointed it out. Um, we also had a really tight drum fill at one point. Man, what was that one I wanted to point out? There was one specific moment I was like, the drummer's just killing it right here. I don't remember, but I said it in the reaction. So if you heard it then, I hope so, because I don't have a timestamp for that. It's a bit of a shame. Um, Choir work. Love the choir. In fact, I love a lot of the additional vocals. I don't know who is in the band and who isn't. I'm assuming that our male lead vocalist is in the band. I don't know about anyone else, so they all sounded secondary to me compositionally. That's not to say that any of the female vocals that were present here aren't part of the band or afterthoughts or whatever. It's just they never felt to have as much spotlight as the male vocalist, and that could have just been this track. I don't know. The choir though, um, fantastic job at being utilized compositionally, but also just the way that they come in and just absolutely command every section they're on. They're utilized often in large bombastic sections. They have a lot of width to them. They're a choir. It's a lot of voices all at one time. That kind of just comes with the job. Um, but every time they come through and they just have 110% heart, passion for the project. At least it sounds like. I don't know. They could be completely disconnected. Could just be a job to them. They were, commissioned for a day to record a couple of tracks for this band. I don't know the situation, but they sound like they're dedicated to the project. Every single attack by them is powerful. It's projected. It's so perfectly designed for the music around it. And you can certainly come in as a choir and phone it in and hit the notes perfectly. Just do your job, right? You read the notes on the paper, and you sing them, and then at the end of the day you collect your paycheck and you go home. But that's not what this feels like. This feels like a choir that's connected to the band. um, and it's every single time they come in, it just elevates everything that the song is doing around it. Loved it. There was one section where we had a Praddick vocal paired with a belt, I think. It might have just been like a mixed head and chest of somebody who just has a really high natural range. But this combination of a Praddick with forward placed clean was just so good. I want to hear more of it. I do. I can't think of. I mean, it's not too often you're going to get that type of metal rock female vocal. Not really rock. I mean, it's still a clean vocal. There's not grit to it. I wouldn't really call it a rock or metal vocal, but more of a theatric. Yep, that theatric vocal mixed with the operatic. Because usually, if you're in a musical, you're either doing an opera or you're doing a theater musical, which means you're using one or the other. I think it's just very odd to hear the two of them together, but it was gorgeous. Absolutely love that texture layering on it. There was a guitar solo in here that I greatly enjoyed. Had a nice pacing to it, nice flow. I didn't hear bass at all, but there's a lot of things going on, so I'm just going to blame that on my ear and the density of the track. I think I said the same thing about Therion. Oh, there was that one bass section because we hit that industrial mode where we had the pure bass was like boom boom ba boom boom ba boom 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 something along those lines. Um, just really honing around a pedal tone with a little flourish at the end and having a sort of a bouncy rhythm to it. I think that was the only time I heard the bass though, when it was given the spotlight. Bit of a shame, but when it comes to stuff like this, I mean, there's always going to be instruments that kind of get hidden within the mix. And that's not even just rock and metal or symphonic metal. I mean, that's everything. There's going to be instruments that don't get picked up as much. Not everything's going to be your lead vocalist or your lead guitar or trumpet, flute. I mean, these are instruments that just cut through everything, whether it's mix wise or just their timbre. Um, so there's probably some other things I'm forgetting as far as specific moments. There was 13 minutes of good moments in here, so I do want to talk about the ending though, because this was kind of flabbergasted me for a little bit. We have a 16 bar phrase, 4 bars of 4 beats, and the drums accented beat one of every bar. So we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. But on the third bar, they do something really interesting where they accent 1 and 3, and the rest of the band follows suit, and it almost feels like they reset their riff, so 3 feels like it becomes 1, but there's only 6 more beats. We have 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the end of our 16 bar phrase. So we reset, but there's only 6 beats left. And so when we get back to beat 1, well, would be beat 17, we're going back to the beginning of this phrase, it feels like beat 7. It doesn't feel like a natural conclusion. It doesn't feel like we ended this fourth bar properly. In fact, it feels like we're missing 2 beats, even though we didn't. We just had a stutter at the beginning of this. And it resets the entire feel of it, and it feels so disruptive. I found it so I knew the trick. I saw through the illusion. I understood why it felt odd, and I still had a hard time counting that section because I would say 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1. Well, why are we back to 1? My brain would it actively refuse to count that 3 as a 3 because it always felt like a 1. It felt like instead of being in 4/4, it felt like we had shifted to 5/4. So we were looking at 10 beat phrases, which would be 4/4/2, which is what it feels like. And there are a lot of bands that would do that, where you would just on that last pocket of 2, so your 4, and then your 2, you just play the first 2 bars of your or the first 2 beats of your other bar, and then you just move on. You start back at 1 again. It doesn't feel out of place to do that. So many bands utilize this idea of just stretching and compressing a single concept whenever changing the length of a bar. Instead of writing something specifically for the 2 beats, you just only play 2 beats of the riff you already have. And it was so kind of frustrating, a little maddening, and very confusing. All of this combined. At first, I was like, why is it doing this? What is happening? I figure out what it's doing, and I still have a tough time understanding it. I know it, but I can't hear it properly. And that becomes frustrating and maddening because it is, at that point, a failure of me. I understand what's going on, I just can't hear it properly. My brain wants to hear it some way different. And that's a fascinating thing about the ending of that track there is that it's it is a frustrating ending, but it's not frustrating because of the music. In fact, I wouldn't be too surprised if some of you just thought it was a normal ending. Maybe it feels a little odd, but not super odd. You just eventually go with the flow on it. I could not. So close to having complete mastery of that section, and yet also so far. I have the understanding, but not the application. And I could not get my brain to rewire properly to groove with it the way that would just be 1-to-1 with their intention. So that was a bit of a frustrating experience with me there. Um, and I think that covers all the main points I wanted to talk about. I'm sure there's some stuff I missed. Like I said, it's an incredibly dense, long track. There's lots of things I could talk about if I had paused every couple of minutes and just really honed in on some really cool ideas. But we don't do that here. A song is not a series of good ideas. A song is a work of art to be enjoyed all at once. Um, Subsequent listens, sure, you want to pause it, whatever. You know what's going on there. Like watching a film again and skipping to your favorite parts. But the first time you experience art should be in totality. I'm not gatekeeping there. If you don't want to do that, fine. I don't care. Your experience with art has nothing to do with me. I say I don't care, and it's kind of like teenager, like I don't care, whatever. But no, like I literally, it has no impact on my life. I I don't let it hold anything over me. But I do believe art should be explored fully in its first exploration. All right, I'm gonna hit some lyrics here, and then we'll wrap this up. And yeah, as expected, and was expected of me, went right over my head. The song speaks very clearly, plain as day, about something else, another folklore, another mythology. Uh, Knowing that it's directly based off of a specific manuscript doesn't really change anything about my understanding of it. I probably would have walked away from this in the same idea of this was probably based off of something. I just wouldn't have the direct name that it was based off of. It speaks about characters and gods and uh, people. We have Sibyls and Hermes, Orpheus, Zarathustra. That's an interesting name. We also name drop Pythagoras and Plato for some reason. But we do say a moment later that they are philosophers eternal. It's interesting to put them in the same grouping as people like Hermes and Orpheus. I know who Hermes is in Greek mythology, but I'm not thinking that's who they're talking about here. I don't know who Orpheus is, and Pythagoras and Plato. I think it kind of goes in the rule of three. We name drop a couple of fictional, mythological people in the first two lines, and then we name drop real people in the third line to give a context to them. Usually something you would do in lore building. This, I don't think, is that. It's speaking about a direct manuscript, kind of have to have the knowledge about it. I don't think it's as necessary here, but I am noticing that. At least it appears that way to me. And ask questions about specific characters. And there is some sort of ritual. Drink the sacred nectar from the rose. The maiden has returned. We're talking about Sibylla or Sophia. Not quite sure. Both names are said. Is cited as the female Christ, the Aphrodite from the sea, and says, "Rise, O wise Venus, Rune Rediviva." So it does seem to be some sort of ritual or divine song, a hymn, which I did mention a couple times in there. Uh, Singing praise towards the Venus, the Aphrodite of the sea, the female Christ, this Sophia character, or maybe the Cybele character. I don't know. They might be one and the same. There's a lot of usage throughout here, which happens a lot in a lot of older religions as well. To have multiple names for a single person or a deity. So yeah, I have nothing to take away from this or add to it. All of it goes over my head, but it is really interesting to read, even in isolation with no context. It's a really neat read. Those are my thoughts on Therion's Adulruna Rediviva. Hey, that rolled off the tongue a little better that time. Let me know what you thought. Anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, correct me on, or just tell me your own perspective of, let me know down in the comments. Above the comment section is a description box, and there you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu, tons of stuff in there. You can find my music, a link to the Discord, ways to support the channel, and so much more. There's just a lot of stuff in there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC. Hopefully my voice will be a little better. I can feel a sickness in the back of my throat, though. I actually started feeling it on Sunday during the live stream, so I'm hoping just another day or two of whatever virus I've got, and it goes away. If it gets worse, though, you guys know me. I'll hit a doctor. I'll get it checked out. I'll get some medicine. But at the time, I don't think we're going to put a hold on the video. until it becomes painful to talk, I think we'll continue to do reactions regardless of how I sound. Um, all right, that wraps that up. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.